Welcome to Asian ID. There are nights when the glow of a phone screen feels brighter than the moon outside the window, and in those silent hours, have you ever realized that the cruelest form of distance is not measured in miles, but in the aching pause after a message has already been read? For years, I believed writing stories made me something of a clever fisherman, casting emotional bait into the deep waters of readers' hearts and patiently waiting for them to bite. But what happens when a story suddenly turns the hook toward the writer instead? That was exactly what happened when I encountered the short drama Heartbeat, read but unreplayed, a story that did not rely on explosive twists or melodramatic confessions, yet somehow transformed one painfully ordinary action into the most irresistible mystery imaginable, because what kind of hidden longing could possibly exist behind the cold silence of seen without reply at first glance? I nearly dismissed the title as another assembly line romance designed to exploit modern anxiety, because in today's world, isn't read but ignored practically a digital coffin filled with indifference, boredom, or the accidental slip of a finger. Yet this drama moved in the opposite direction entirely, turning silence itself into a trembling signal exchange between two cautious souls. And isn't it astonishing how something so emotionally devastating can also become strangely beautiful? The male lead, Karon, carries loneliness even within his name, and unlike the exaggerated princes of traditional romance dramas, he is merely a man imprisoned inside schedules, logic, and emotional restraint. But haven't we all met people who appear perfectly composed while secretly starving for warmth? His life is constructed from data, discipline, and carefully controlled routines, until Zhai Yiying enters his world like untimely sunlight spilling through a locked window. And doesn't unexpected tenderness always arrive at the worst possible moment? What makes her unforgettable is not perfection, but authenticity, because she is neither a helpless dream girl nor invincible heroine sculpted from fantasy, but rather a woman burdened with ambition, exhaustion, insecurity, and courage all at once. So isn't flawed sincerity far more captivating than polished perfection? She becomes restless over a single unread message, yet still finds the bravery to confront her emotions directly when it matters most. And haven't we all experienced that humiliating contradiction between fear and longing? Sometimes her silence is fueled by pride, sometimes by hesitation, and sometimes by the desperate refusal to settle for half-hearted affection. But in the end, isn't every unanswered message secretly a battlefield between dignity and desire? The genius of this drama lies in the way it dissects communication itself into countless invisible wars. Because those empty chat boxes are no longer emotional voids, but stretched out psychological landscapes overflowing with tension, aren't they? Karon stares at the screen while his fingertips hover above the send button before retreating once more, deleting sentence after sentence until only a hollow okay remains. And who understands this agony better than writers who know the fiercest emotions are often trapped inside the smallest words? Meanwhile, Zhai Yiying clutches her phone as hope slowly dissolves into disappointment, before transforming into fragile self-comfort disguised as indifference. And isn't her emotional spiral painfully familiar to anyone who has ever waited too long for someone they cared about? Great storytelling often follows the iceberg theory, where only a fraction is visible above the surface while the greater truth remains submerged beneath silence. And doesn't this drama master that philosophy with terrifying precision instead of drowning viewers in dramatic speeches? It buries emotion inside fleeting glances, curled fingers, unfinished sentences, and the endlessly reappearing words typing above the conversation box. So how could any extravagant dialogue possibly compete with the unbearable power of restraint? The audience becomes an accomplice rather than a spectator, forced to fill in the emotional gaps using their own memories, fears, and unfinished stories. And isn't that participation what makes the experience feel so deeply personal? Watching the series becomes less like consuming entertainment and more like solving a psychological puzzle, because every silence feels loaded with meaning, every delay feels dangerous, and every unread emotion threatens collapse. So how could viewers possibly look away? As a writer myself, I found the pacing especially remarkable, because short dramas resemble delicate poems where every unnecessary moment becomes a flaw. And doesn't true mastery often reveal itself through precision rather than excess? There are no bloated misunderstandings or endless flashbacks designed merely to waste time, because each interaction functions like a carefully placed gear moving the relationship forward one fragile inch at a time. And isn't emotional progression most satisfying when it feels earned rather than forced? The tenderness hides inside details so small they almost escape notice, because he remembers her casual hatred of cilantro while she secretly treasures a forgotten blog post he wrote years ago. And aren't these quiet acts of remembrance more intimate than grand declarations of love? What elevates the drama even further is its refusal to isolate romance from reality, Because Karon struggles beneath the crushing conflict between career and personal longing, while Zhai Yiying fights the exhausting loneliness of building a life in an unforgiving city. So doesn't love feel more meaningful when it grows from real soil instead of fantasy clouds? Their hesitation is not childish manipulation but the deeply adult fear of balancing pride, survival, vulnerability, and sincerity all at once. And isn't that precisely why their silence hurts so much by the final episodes, when Karon finally abandons his cold ambiguity and sends a trembling voice message instead of another empty text? Something inside the story suddenly breaks open like a dam collapsing after years of pressure. And wasn't that moment less about romance than duration itself? And when Zhai Yiying stops obsessing over response times and chooses instead to stand directly before him, demanding an honest answer face to face, doesn't the entire emotional war suddenly transform into something heartbreakingly simple in the end? The greatest resolution is not victory, surrender, or dramatic triumph, but merely two frightened people gathering enough courage to step outside the fortresses built from their own insecurities. And isn't that the most difficult journey any human being can take? Perhaps this is the gentlest lesson the drama offers to both audiences and storytellers alike, because all the tension, silence, restraint, and emotional strategy ultimately exist for one sacred moment when two hearts finally stop hiding behind screens and choose to arrive beside each other instead. Don't they? The core of every unforgettable story has never been technique alone, but sincerity powerful enough to survive fear, hesitation, and pride. And if that is true, then how many people in our own lives remain trapped forever inside conversations we were too afraid to finish tonight? When your phone lights up in the darkness and another unread message quietly waits for your reply, will you once again retreat behind silence? Or will you finally gather the courage to press send before the person on the other side disappears forever? Thank you for watching the video. See you again.